You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a student and an employee at a university sports facility. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, Ratner Athletics Centre. How can I help you?
Yes, hi. I'm interested in finding out some information about membership.
Certainly. Are you a student?
No, is that a problem? I was a student here 2 years ago.
All right, that's no problem. Current students get membership for no charge, but recreational memberships are also available for purchase for university faculty, staff, alumni and retirees, as well as their spouses and children.
OK, good. How much does it cost?
For an alumnus, that's £240 annually or £100 for a month.
Oh, that's quite expensive. It's a shame I didn't take advantage of the athletics facility when I was a student here. I'll have to think about this.
Well, we do offer a really excellent facility. For the cost, members have access to the Emily Pankhurst Fitness Centre, which is a beautiful exercise space, open and full of light. The fitness centre includes 2 weight circuits, free weights, rowing machines, elliptical trainers, recumbent and upright bicycles, step mills and treadmills, and many other activities. But the most prominent, and I'd have to say popular, feature of the Ratner Centre is the Dalton swimming pool. It's 50 metres by 25 metres and includes up to 20 lanes in the 25-metre dimension and 9 lanes in the 50-metre dimension, and also has 2 1-metre diving boards available. What activities specifically are you interested in?
Yes, well, I'm interested in swimming and also in getting started with some weight training, although I've never tried it before in my life. I feel rather intimidated, actually. Is there instruction available? You know, someone to teach me to use the machines and maybe help me figure out a training programme to reach my goals?
Yes, we have personal trainers available for an additional cost. We also offer fitness evaluation, which, by the way, I highly recommend for someone just starting out with weight training, and you would be orientated to the machines as part of this.
Oh, one more thing. What are the opening hours?
We're open from 6 in the morning to midnight on weekdays, and from 6 in the morning to 9 p.m. on weekends.
Oh, that's good. All right, well, I guess I'd like to join.
Before you hear the second conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Very well. Can I have your name, please?
That's Shannon Fleet. SHANNON
OK. And your address?
24 Whitehall Close, Newcastle.
Sorry, can you please spell the street name for me?
Yes, of course. That's WHITEHALL.
Got it. And your postcode?
NE01EN.
N as in night and E as in England.
Yes, that's correct.
Uh-huh. I'll need a phone number.
OK, it's 9765 484 493.
That's 9765 484 943.
No, sorry. The last three numbers are 493, not 943.
OK. Now, you'll need to pay when you come for the first time, and you can either pay by cash or credit card.
I'll pay cash.
Fine. And be sure to bring some sort of proof of address, like a bill or driver's licence.
I don't drive. Will my electricity bill do?
Yes, that's fine. And also bring a passport-sized photo so we can make up your membership card.
OK, thanks. I'll come by this afternoon.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will now hear a speaker talking to a group of students planning to study in South America next year. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello there. Good afternoon. Thank you for finding the time in your busy schedules to come to the International Student Office's first orientation meeting for students going abroad to South America next autumn. By the way, if you haven't already signed next to your name on our attendance lists, they're located on the table at the entrance of the auditorium. Be sure to do it on your way out. Remember, this orientation meeting is obligatory, so you need to make sure we know that you're here. All right, to begin, we're going to be talking about health, and specifically the procedures that you have to go through in order to get your student visas for your host country. For all of you, this will entail gathering a folder of health information, such as vaccination records and proof from your doctors that you're not suffering from any serious contagious diseases. For many of you, this will also entail getting some extra vaccinations, depending on your destination country. All the specifics that each of you will need are to be found in your host country handbook that you received when you were accepted into the programme. Also, each one of you is required to attend a consultation with a doctor at the Student Health Centre who is specialised in travel medicine. The health centre can give you details about appointment times, but be sure to book your appointment early because the specialist is only at the health centre at certain times. To have the most benefit, you should have your meeting at least 4 to 6 weeks before your trip to allow time for your vaccines to take effect. Now, at this consultation, you will be given all the latest information about what vaccines you'll need and any other health considerations you need to be aware of. If you'll need to take medication for malaria, for example, or what to expect in case of any existing health issues.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, I want to talk in a bit more detail about some important health issues that many of you will face. First of all, I want to say a few things about malaria, which will apply to most of you with South American destinations. In most South American countries, malaria is present in some areas, but not in others. In Brazil, for example, the Amazon basin is a high-risk area, while the coastal cities, such as Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, have a very low risk of malaria. So, if you will be studying in Sao Paulo, you will not need to take medication for malaria. However, if you are studying in Sao Paulo and doing field work somewhere in the Amazon basin, then you will need medication. Likewise, if you plan to travel into rural regions, then you will need medication. You should be realistic about what your plans are, and if you decide not to take malaria medication, keep informed and don't travel to a high-risk area. We've had 2 instances of students returning with malaria in the last 5 years, and both cases had to do with spontaneous travel after their studies to areas with a high risk of malaria. Of course, there are quite a few other insect-borne illnesses that can be caught, so it's essential to avoid being bitten as much as possible, even if you are taking malaria medication. To prevent insect bites, you should wear long-sleeved shirts and long trousers whenever possible, and use an insect repellent on any bare skin. You should also bring a flying insect spray to help clear rooms of mosquitoes. The product should contain a pyrethroid insecticide. Bed nets treated with permethrin, if you will not be sleeping in an air-conditioned or well-screened room, are also a very good idea. Although it's not always possible, it's best to remain indoors in a screened or air-conditioned area during the peak biting periods of dusk and dawn. Finally, in much of South America, there is a risk of schistosomiasis, a rather nasty parasitic infection that can be contracted in fresh water. So do not swim in fresh water except in well-chlorinated swimming pools. Any questions so far?
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3. You will hear a conversation about plans for a university sports centre.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Before we go on to look at specific sports, let's think for a moment about the non-sports facilities we really need here. Things like better changing rooms and showers.
Yes. If this really is going to be a state-of-the-art building, it'll need to have high-tech amenities, but also places for people to chill out after all the exercise they've been doing. Somewhere they can meet up for a drink or whatever afterwards is essential in a place like this. But what else?
How about a sauna? Those who use them say it's the perfect way to relax after you've trained.
The trouble is, though, that there's a debate going on about how safe they are. Some say it's risky to be exposed to all that heat before or after strenuous exercise, which of course is exactly when people in sports centres want to use them. There have also been problems with people overusing them to sweat off weight. So, to avoid any possible dangers, I don't think I'd include them on my list.
Talking of dangers, I wonder whether we ought to have some sort of facility where minor injuries like cuts and bruises and sprains can be treated.
Maybe. It would seem to make sense with all the mishaps that are bound to occur when you have so many people running and jumping about and so on. Hold on though. Isn't the new medical centre going to be built right opposite?
Yes, it is. It should be finished by the end of next year.
Then there's no point, is there? Anyone who gets hurt can go over there, where there'll be much better treatment than anything we could offer on site.
Yes, I can see that.
What we should provide, though, is a facility with full-time physiotherapists for everybody on the campus, that is. As well as treating people, they could work on prevention of things like muscle tears and strains.
Right.
And something else the new place ought to have, also as a way of preventing injuries, is somewhere to test just how fit people are before they start lifting weights or running long distances and so on.
Yes, I was going to suggest that. When I was at the Newport Centre, they put me on a static bike to check out my cardiovascular system. Then they worked out how much body fat I had. All of it valuable information telling you exactly what shape you're in.
Another thing I've heard some universities do, especially some of the newer ones, is provide rooms and equipment for lectures to take place actually inside their sports centres. How do you feel about that?
Well, as it happens, I've got first-hand experience of that too. We used to have some of our sports science lectures right next to the main sports hall, and I think it made what we were hearing about seem much more relevant to the real world. So in that respect, I definitely think it's a good idea, yes.
I can see that, though my own feeling is that we need to have more concrete reasons. The problem is that we won't have unlimited space, and somehow I don't think providing more lecture halls is going to be one of our priorities. So I'd be against that one, I'm afraid. Anything else?
Well, just that I agree about the need to have a place where people can go for a chat and maybe have a coffee or a bite to eat together. That was something I always thought was one of the strong points of the centre in London. It was a great place to find out about new activities from the people who actually did them.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
So what about the main sports facilities themselves? What do we need?
Well, we don't need a rugby pitch because there's already one on the campus. The same's true of table tennis, really. Most of the halls of residence for students have their own tables, so there's no point in using precious space here for any more.
Agreed. Something none of them have, though, is any sort of pool. A lot of students have complained about this, saying they have to take a bus downtown if they want to go for a swim.
Yes, that's definitely one for this place. Perhaps a jacuzzi too. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would. Perhaps next to the squash courts, just down there to the right. They are very popular, by the way. I think we should have a couple more here, don't you?
Absolutely. And another sport that's been growing in popularity is volleyball, especially since we did so well at the last Olympics.
Don't you mean basketball?
Yes, I do, sorry. Anyway, the point is that there is a court in the old gym next to the Students' Union building, but it always seems to be fully booked up, even though it's not very good. And there's nowhere else on campus to play.
OK, let's have one of those too. How much space have we got left, by the way?
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture on child language acquisition.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Today, in our series of lectures on human language, we're going to be looking at the way in which children acquire language. The study of how people learn to speak has proved to be one of the most fascinating, important and complex branches of language study. So, let's look at these three features in turn. Firstly, why is it fascinating? This stems from the natural interest people take in the developing abilities of young children. People are fascinated by the way in which children learn, particularly their own children. Secondly, it is important to study how we acquire our first language, because the study of child language can lead us to a greater understanding of language as a whole. The third point is that it's a complex study, and this is because of the enormous difficulties that are encountered by researchers as soon as they attempt to explain language development, especially in the very young child. In today's lecture, we will cover a number of topics. We will start by talking about research methods. There are a number of ways that researchers have investigated children's language, and these include the use of diaries, recordings, and tests. And we'll be looking at how researchers make use of these various methods. We will then go on to examine the language learning process, starting with the development of speech in young infants during the first year of life. This is the time associated with the emergence of the skills of speech perception. In other words, an emergence of the child's awareness of his or her own ability to speak. We will continue with our examination of the language learning process, this time by looking at language learning in the older child, that is, in children under 5. As they mature, it's possible to begin analysis in conventional linguistic terms. And so, in our analysis, we will look at phonological, grammatical, and semantic development in preschool children. In the second part of the talk, I would like to review some educational approaches to the question of how linguistic skills can be developed. In other words, how can we assist the young child to learn language skills at school? Initially, we will look at issues that arise in relation to spoken language. We will then look at reading and review a number of approaches that have been proposed in relation to the teaching of reading. Finally, we will conclude today's talk with an account of current thinking about the most neglected area of all, the child's developing awareness of written language.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.